Greetings and salutations, friends! So, Bell of Lost Souls gave an editorial piece to the group admins of Feminist 40k. So this is a piece written by presumably multiple people who are all admins in Feminist 40k. Now, I'm entirely sure that Bell of Lost Souls will of course give equal space to a counter-argument, but before that, I will look at the article myself. So, starting out. Warhammer 40k has been around for a long time, more than 20 years. Yes, it's 30 years actually, but hey, what difference does a decade make? In fact, in that time, a veritable ton of writing and rewriting has gone into the fictional universe, attracting players of all age groups in hobbyist miniature tabletop wargaming with an equally active online player base for its video game equivalents. However, like all fandoms, it has its dark underbelly. Yes, a minuscule percentage of the total population are probably assholes, just like humanity in general. A tribal and woefully toxic group of players who seek to isolate and protect their fandom at all costs. If this group exists, it is an absolutely minuscule group. Similar to a child screaming over their section of the playground when it is to be shared for everyone. Oh, sorry, okay, I didn't know that you were talking about the feminids. You know, the people who are screaming that people who are not quote-unquote friendly should be removed from the hobby to create a better playground environment. Sorry, I thought you were talking about 40k players in general. This has plagued the fandom for generations, and while not exclusive to the game, has turned off many players who feel uncomfortable playing a hobby that requires interaction with such folks. Has it? I mean, I'm sure it has, but how many is many? Do you have any kind of statistics on this? Any kind of evidence? Anything other than just a vague word? Many. A sample of such fine behavior includes, but is not limited to, demeaning and crass treatment of women. Do you have some evidence? An anecdote at least? Condoning racists? Really? Again, do you have some evidence? Abhorrent behavior towards minorities or disabled persons? Again, do you have any evidence? Have you, for example, a game store pointing towards a cripple in a wheelchair going, ha ha ha, cripple? Because I don't think you do. Online harassment and shaming other people for daring to enjoy the same hobby. Again, you are talking about such a minuscule percentage of the player base, it frankly isn't worth addressing. And let's not even for a second pretend that this is any kind of a one-way street. Feminist 40k. Quoting, "For one thing, we'd rather not troll his channel for one or two things he might have said because of the vast majority of his content, which is politically toxic, divisive, insulting, racist, misogynistic, and apologist. That's like saying Hitler was a genocidal maniac, but yeah, he treated Ava Brown right and painted quite well. This is in reference to me, calling me politically toxic, divisive, insulting, racist, misogynistic, apologistic, and then going on to compare me to Hitler and the genocide." Now, personally, I don't give a flying fuck about this. They are free to say anything and everything they want about me. I could not care less. But, as I mentioned, let us not pretend for an instant that this toxicity and abuse is in any way a one-line street. And I don't blame you for that, Feminist 40k, because this is an internet discussion. Vitriol will flow both ways, but I will not let you claim the moral high ground when you so clearly have no claim to it. Moving on. It is one thing to deny the existence and experiences of the many players, again with the weasel words here, who have faced such treatment by self-proclaimed fans. It is another altogether to condone and partake in such behavior, and I do agree. For example, comparing somebody to Hitler is not a very nice thing. I'll simply just refer you straight back to my previous point. And this has forced many of us in the community to shun open spaces for fear of inviting anything from rape threats to unsolicited advances from these shining examples of humanity. Feminist 40k is a closed community, and that is not because we want to be, but because we have to be. Stop you there, oh poor tragic victim. That does not actually appear to be the case. I have heard from quite a few people, and I'll bring up some examples on the screen now, because unlike you, I can bring the evidence, suggesting that you have banned and deleted their threads for disagreements, and certainly not for rape threats or unsolicited advancements. Hell, one of these is even a woman, so how precisely is she guilty of sexism? Oh dear, intersectional overlords. I would love to hear about that. And let's be honest here, while you do close yourself off in closed groups due to fear, it is not the fear of abuse, sexism, or rape threats. It is because you are afraid of your ideological opposition, because you are entirely aware of how flimsy your opinions and ideology is. Which is why, to enter your group, you will request people answer these 3 questions. Do men have privilege in society? Why don't women play 40k more often? And what does the word feminism mean to you? Out of these 3 questions, only one is at least tangentially related to 40k. It appears to me, based upon the evidence that we have in front of us, that you are feminist ideologues first. And if I am to be generous, 40k fans second. Moving on in the article, what are such over-the-top reactions up against? You mean your claimed over-the-top reactions? Let me guess. Your side is nothing but virtuous, am I correct? Let's find out. Why, the horror of questioning the lore, of course. Warhammer 40k is built upon decades of continuously rewritten and fluid fiction. It is, however, it is not quite as fluid or as frequently rewritten as you are suggesting here. The groundwork of 40k has remained fairly constant over the last iterations, essentially anything post-Rogue Trader, but hey, details. With changes made to reflect the times and Games Workshop's player base. At some point, women and minorities start to challenge the necessity of certain elements, such as the unnecessary sexualization of female-oriented miniatures to the lack of representation in model choice, and request Games Workshop to expand their selection as to include everyone in the mass carnage that is the 41st millennium. Alright, well the thing is with representation, 40k already has representation. The models are grey. You can paint them black, purple, lily white, orange, grey, red, anything for all I care. It has Xenos representation. It has female representation. It has black representation. It has Asian representation. It represents quite a lot of things already in the various chapters. Salamanders, for example, the White Scars, the Sisters of Battle, Tau, Xenos, everything. You don't really have an argument here when it comes to representation, and we'll get to the sexualization part, but the article goes into that a little bit more in depth in a moment, so let us continue for the time being. The vitriolic reaction to this, asking others to treat each other fairly, because that is all they are doing. Remember, they are not producing any harassment of themselves. They are not labeling anyone else. They're not saying mean things. They're not blocking people. They're not banning people. And they are certainly not constructing a giant straw man to suggest that tabletop gaming has some huge misogyny problem, to the point where we are, in Feminist 40k's own words, condoning racist and abhorrent behavior towards minorities or disabled persons. They're not doing that at all. All they want is a little bit of representation, and to change the lore a little bit here and there, of course, and to enforce a little bit of diversity, and stuff like that. They're perfectly fine. They are the good people here, I swear. But let's move on in the article. It is both astonishing and frustratingly common. Aside from the individual harassment of players, could you please present some chat logs, by the way, just so we have something to base this on? There have been attempts at banning our page, again, please do present it, concerted efforts to shut us down, please present it, and continuous defamation and bullying online for the audacity of challenging established canon. please do present all of this. If you have all of these evidence, I wouldn't have to take your word for it, because I am not going to take your word for it. Which has been changed time and again for varying reasons. You make it sound as if the established canon has been changing massively, drastically, and constantly. It really has not. It has been evolving slowly and quite subtly over the course of 30-odd years. The only truly drastic change to the fundamental aspects of the lore would really be from Rogue Trader to modern 40k. Now that was a very drastic change. It completely changed the entirety of the setting, the galaxy, how the Space Marines worked, how the Imperium worked, the backstory, practically all of it. But if we, for example, look at the 2nd edition Space Marine Codex and compare it to the latest Space Marine Codex, you will see that at their heart, the Adeptus Astartes have remained much the same. So these suggestions that 40k is just constantly in massive flux is really overstating the point by quite a bit, hasn't it? Moving on, you'd almost think they hated the hobby. Yes, Strawman is a little bit further. We are racists, we are rape apologists, we will threaten women with rape, we are misogynists, sexists, and now we hate 40k. Keep just piling it on, because every time you make one of these blatantly ridiculous generalizations, you offend even more of the community you claim to be here to improve. With the amount of anger directed at our members, because your members are 40k, aren't they? Because you are, of course, the virtuous ones, as we have already established. Change is integral to keeping media fresh and exciting. Take the Dark Imperium series of released... Dark Imperium series of released. Yeah, that's not me reading it wrong, it's just written more like that. By Games Workshop, for example. Deaths of named characters and planets, returning Primarchs, new factions and miniatures. All these involve heavy lore changes and retcons. Not really, to be honest. The Dark Imperium did not introduce a huge amount of fundamental lore changes. The Imperium was split in two. That was an effect of Cadia falling. That was a logical effect of the network keeping the Eye of Terror in check, failing. The death of named characters, that is a result of war, which is quite integral to 40k. The death of planets, also quite integral to 40k. Planets die all the time. The returning of Primarchs, even that is not that huge of a change. It is a pretty damn large change, but I would like to remind you that the resurrection of Robute Guilliman was teased all the way back in the Ultramarines novel series. It is not that much of a fundamental change to 40k. It is an evolution of 40k. And these subtleties are quite important. Moving on, and it only bodes well for a hobby that is older than many of its more modern enthusiasts. Change is neither inherently good nor bad. That is true, but I maintain my position that the change you wish, which is diversity and representation purely for the sake of diversity and representation, is not very 40k. Nor is it an inherently good action. In fact, I might go so far as to say that diversity purely for the sake of diversity, without any connection to the lore, is indeed an inherently bad change. But hey, moving on. But there could not be a more perfect time to ask for a wider series of models when new ideas are being tossed about in the boardrooms of Games Workshop. Take Adepta Sororita's armor. It emphasizes the female figure to a sexualized level. I honestly would not entirely agree with that. It is form-fitting, this is true, but that is due to the fact that it is a far more agile pattern of power armor. They are more agile due to the fact that the power armor is smaller. It is because it is not as effective as full-scale power armor, ergo not as bulky. And as for the sexualized level, the only thing I would really say to be overly sexualized on a Sororita would potentially be the boob plates, and honestly, that as well has a lore reason. The Adepta Sororitas are the brides of the Emperor. Their femininity is part of the point. In fact, it is one of their major plot points for why there are Adepta Sororitas in the first place, due to the fact that the ecclesiarchy are not allowed to have any men under arms, and they quite niftily sidestep this by using women under arms. By making them clearly feminine, they are once again simply just sidestepping the decree from the High Lords of Terror. And this, by the way, would be an example of diversity that makes sense. The Adepta Sororitas are not shoehorned in because we had to have a female army. They fit within the lore, and there's a solid lore reason for why the Adepta Sororitas exist and are the way they are. And to change that for no other reason than you personally don't like boob plates, that is just incredibly selfish. I mean, you brought up the example earlier about supposedly everyone else refusing to share their toys and whining like a spoiled child. I considered it to be extremely entitled and selfish to say that the entire hobby needs to change simply because you want it to. That is just ridiculous. And in my opinion, the perfect example of diversity purely for the sake of diversity. But hey, moving on. Not very glaring on its own, but alongside nearly naked repentant fanatics, a long-running mistreatment in both in-game lore and GW codexes, and a lack of relatively cheap and updated armies. Okay, so 1. Nearly naked repentant fanatics. That is because they are repentant fanatics. Just like these guys. Would you suggest that these fellows are overly sexualized? No, I didn't think so. And a long-running mistreatment of both in-game lore and GW codexes. What? Are you telling me that repentant fanatics are a mistreatment of Warhammer 40k lore? Lore in which certain ecclesiarchy priests have whipped out entire populations' worth of fanatics and quite literally thrown them at chaos. I'm sorry, but I don't think you know what you're talking about with that. And as for the relative lack of cheap and updated armies, I completely and utterly agree. We do need Sisters of Battle in plastic, no question about it, and it should have happened years ago. GW really dropped the ball on that one, no argument. Which, when I come to think of it, considering the fact that I am, by your own words, a misogynist, that doesn't seem to make sense, but hey, we'll just leave that little incongruous detail for later, shall we? Moving on. It's hard for women, or indeed anyone keen on having female models, to not take that as a statement that GW just doesn't care much for its female player base. That's not true, is it? If they didn't give a shit at all about their female player base, if we accept your premise that females need female models, then why did they release the Sisters of Battle in the first place? I mean, hell, I could turn this argument around and say that clearly Games Workshop don't care a diddly dick for anyone who likes knights because they didn't update Bretonia. Ever, practically. And of course, while it is the tried, true, and tested feminist strategy to simply claim to be a victim of some completely unrelated event, like for example a company not updating a miniature line, somehow making you the victim, this one just really doesn't fly, does it? Moving on once again, the matter of variety and ethnicity of models also turns away minorities who prefer to be represented by more than cultural stereotypes, born of the comic books and action movies of the 80s. Are the white scars stereotypes of 80s action movies? Are the salamanders... The salamanders, the Space Marine chapter that actually gives a shit about civilian life, are cultural stereotypes born from comics and books of the 80s? Do you even know what you're saying right now? I guess your perception of the 80s must be remarkably different to mine, but hey, details. Moving on. Why change our precious hobby then? Good question. Ask the Frothing Furrious fans. Oh yes, those again. I think I can see a straw man coming, who spend the better half of their day finding ways to harass other fans who also want to make small plastic soldiers kill each other. Why not find another hobby and let mine stagnate in peace? That was so utterly predictable that I don't even take any enjoyment in saying, fucking called it. And hey, just to really hammer home the point, allow me to list all of the things we've been called so far. So, if you are a fan of 40k and you disagree with this person, you are a frothing, furious, racist, sexist, ableist, abusive, toxic, tribal, demeaning, crass, harassing, vitriolic, rape threat issuing child. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Especially from the community that doesn't harass or abuse anyone. But hey, details, right? Moving on. Once again, because we love Warhammer 40k, we love its over-the-top design, its shameless lifting of tropes from pop culture, its satire of fascist theocracy, its sheer scale and flexibility that allows one to make an army that is very much our own. 40k is a setting with many, many individual stories, and what makes it so fun is that we are free to make our own. But it could be better if Games Workshop decides widen their market. Again, that's not me, that's actually how it's written. Okay, so this is what interests me. You just defeated your own point. You just said that you can enjoy it in any way you wish. Hell, I've even seen conversions on your 40k Facebook page about female space marines, and the kind of Sisters of Battles you want to see. You're already doing this, so why must you change the hobby for everyone else? If you can already play the hobby however you wish, why do you feel the need to impose your value system and your metrics of what is good and bad on everyone else? It is just so incredibly conceited and selfish. I'm just baffled that you dare suggest it. I mean, it's so ballsy to stand there and say openly and brazenly, yes, I can do whatever I want with the hobby, but I still demand it change to cater to my specific tastes. It's just mind-boggling to me. But hey, we're almost at the end of it, so let's move on, shall we? Everyone wins, except for all of the people who like the lore the way it is now, of course. All of those people objectively lose, but hey, details. We don't care about those people, because they are the frothing, furious, racist, sexist, ableist, abusive, toxic, tribal, demeaning, crass, harassing, vitriolic, rape threat issuing children. And yes, I'm probably going to use that in quite a few videos in the future from now on, but hey. Minorities gain better representation. More options for writing and models are sold. The sentence structure. Okay, more models are sold. Do you have any evidence for this? Is there any evidence whatsoever that increased representation increases participation from the group that they are representing? I mean, by your own logic, 40k should be filled with female gamers because we have an all-female army. And yet, strangely enough, the overwhelming majority of 40k players are male. It would seem that reality contradicts your thesis here. Not that that's going to bother you in any way, but just figured I'd point it out. The company makes more money and thus has more options for its player base. Again, completely unproven, and I think it to be utter bullshit, honestly. I do not believe that neither minorities nor women are so weak-willed as to look at 40k and say to themselves, well, there's not enough brown people, there's not enough women. I know there's an entire army of them, but that's just not good enough. I mean, for fuck's sake, that would be like me saying, oh, I tried playing the orcs, but there was no white male representation. I tried the Tyranids, no white male theirs either. I tried the Necrons, still no white males. God damn it. Then I played the Space Marines, and they're all hulking muscle masses. Where is the scrawny neckbeard representation, I ask of you? It doesn't seem to exist. I guess I'm just gonna have to quit the hobby then, aren't I? Or I could just fucking not and keep playing because I enjoyed the universe the way it is, which is why I got into it in the first place. But hey, details. It is much deeper than simply changing a coat of paint or adding a pair of accentuated breasts on a chest plate. But the reactionary views of loud, stubborn dinosaurs, oh, I'll add that in as well, are truly ruining the experience as much as they are claiming to be the victim. Wait, what? We're claiming to be the victims of this. I'll be honest, that one caught me off guard. Oh, okay. Sure, whatever you say. Projecting fucking much, but yeah, of course. We're the ones claiming to be the victims here, despite you being the group that claim that you need to close off your community due to all of the rape threats you're receiving. But yes, the rest of us are totally going for the victim role here. Moving on. Representation matters. No, I really don't think it does. And I don't think you have any evidence to suggest it does either. It shows people that they are recognized, that they are not simply token pieces on a board, more homogeneous than a vanilla cheesecake. Okay, so we're going to prove to people that they are not token pieces on a board by making them into token pieces on a board. Sounds genius to me. It allows women to safely play the hobby without spending the whole time staring at sexualized representations of the female form. Okay, you know what you could do then? You could cover over the offensive breastplates with green stuff. You could do that. Or you could play Imperial Guard. All of them have helmets and say, well, they're females. You could do that. Or hell, you could play Tyranids. There's not a whole lot of sexualization there. Or hell, you could play Necrons. They could be female or male, for all you know. They're literally gender neutral. This is just not a problem, is it? And then deal with men who seem to think they have a right to allow what women can or can't feel demeaned by. What? Okay, you may take offense at whatever you will, and I will gladly ridicule you for it. But hey, that's up to you, isn't it? Most importantly, it allows gaming to be a fun hobby, without fear of being harassed online, threatened, insulted, or publicly shamed for one's preference of miniature post-humans. Except you have publicly insulted and shamed me for that very thing. Oh, and by the way, I'll just put this up on the screen here in relation to the threatened part. You know, the message where you decided to pop back in 2 hours later and clarify that you wouldn't like to give my address out to someone, and that you don't personally condone violence, but if anybody else wanted to do it, you know, that's a personal thing. Fucking hell, dude. I categorically reject that a hobby under the sway of these people is going to be a fun hobby without fear of being harassed. I categorically reject that notion at its very fucking core. And hell, you have given me the evidence to prove that statement, so thank you. Let's finish it up. Fiction is written by people and subject to change. Reality, however, is affected by the choices of the writers, and should take precedence over the former. Media that stagnates will not survive the times, and if there's anything we can all agree on, it should be that we all have the right to enjoy rolling a series of ones and watch our army shoot itself in the face en masse. Yes, we do agree on that, but we do not agree on your suppositions. Media that stagnates will not survive the times. Yeah, that is entirely correct. However, currently Games Workshop is booming. It has never done as good as it is currently doing. It is clearly not stagnating in the slightest. And I do not, once again, accept your premise that increased diversity or representation purely for the sake of these things will in any way reflect positively on sales numbers. If you have evidence to back that up, please do present it. And until then, I will simply point towards the fact that Games Workshop has never done better and say they don't need to change a damn thing. Oh, and all the way at the end there, while I am of course entirely certain that Bell of Lost Souls will be allowing a counter-argument to be put up with exactly the same prominence as this article, disputing the idea that male gamers are frothing, furious, racist, sexist, ableist, abusive, toxic, tribal, demeaning, crass, harassing, vitriolic, rape threat issuing, stubborn dinosaur children. That is really quite the mouthful. And while I'm sure that article will be written by somebody with great insight into 40k, preferably maybe a female, hell, I could recommend a few if you wanted me to. But until then, the Bell of Lost Souls should feel free, if they would wish to post this video in its entirety, and they may even monetize it, with my full and unconditional blessing. Because I am not afraid of this conversation, unlike Feminist 40k, which, by the way, this was an effort to establish communication between me and them. I, of course, agreed immediately and even offered to host it on my YouTube channel to give them tons of exposure. They, of course, refused. I have been Arch. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.